Hello, and welcome to the Wicker Library. My name is Leah. So happy to have you here today. I am going to be doing a bit of a little recommendations video for you all, and I'm going to be recommending books, adult books, based off of YA books. And these book recommendations should be taken with a grain of salt and in a particular way, because I don't think these book to book recommendations are very exact. I'm picking more off of either character dynamics or themes that you may have enjoyed from one book to the other. And obviously, you can take this recommendation either direction if you have been reading more adult books and want to read more YA books and don't know where to start. Maybe see if you have enjoyed an adult book recommendation here and vice versa. So, this recommendation video will just be me having fun and recommending books that I think connect really well to a YA book I read and enjoyed to some level. So let's just get right into it. Starting off with the recommendation I feel most solid about, and that is if you enjoyed Radio Silence by Alice Oseman, which is one of my favorite books of all time. I love the themes in this story that just go over friendship and growing up and not knowing what the hell you're doing with your life. I think you would really enjoy picking up Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. And this book I also really enjoyed. It is very different from Radio Silence, so don't think it's an exact replica or anything like that. And, once again, disclaimer to take these comparisons generously, but this book also has a bit of a podcast element to it further along in the story, which I won't spoil because it's kind of a fun thing to find out as you read. But this book follows a woman who basically gets married to someone while drunkenly out and marries a stranger, a beautiful stranger, but a stranger nonetheless. And they wake up together and realize they were married. And the two women have to realize what that means. But that is the blurb of this story, and I think it's why a lot of people go into this story, except I would argue that this book is poorly marketed. That is not really what this story is about at all. It is much more self-reflection, and our main character is just trying to figure herself out. She's older than, a YA audience. I think she's in her late 20s. She has just finished a PhD program that has taken up the majority of her life and her energy, and now she's a bit lost in the world. And I think that echoes a lot of the themes of Radio Silence, just at different points in your life. And I think if you enjoyed one, you can definitely at least appreciate the other one. And yeah, both books were fantastic, and I would highly recommend them both, but especially if you liked or were interested in reading maybe the other one. The next combination of books was one that actually inspired this video, and I was just waiting to get more than two recommendations, and that is if you enjoyed Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alir Sainz. And this book is a cult classic. Everyone has almost read it by now on BookTube. If you haven't, I would recommend checking it out. I know it was recently adapted into a film, which I'm excited to check out myself. But this book follows two boys as they fall in love over the course of a summer, and it's a lot more self-discovery. If you couldn't tell, I have a theme that I enjoy, especially in YA fiction, but there's a lot of self-discovery, sexuality discussions, and friendship, but in this case, friendship goes beyond into a romantic sexual relationship. But if you enjoyed this book, I think you should pick up Swimming in the Dark by Tomas Jadrowski. This book I read a while ago. Same with Aristotle and Dante. I read that a while ago. But this book also follows two men over the course of a summer falling in love. It's much sadder, but it also has the similar melancholy feel to it. Like, you know, these characters are really going through it, same with Aristotle and Dante, but they have each other and they have these friends that are also surrounding them. And it's just so beautifully written, both books, but especially Swimming in the Dark. Swimming in the Dark is a book that I've been meaning to reread for so long just because of the prose I remember. And it is a brilliant story, and you don't really need to know much more about it except that it follows Poland in the 1980s. And I think Aristotle and Dante also takes place in the 80s. So, you know, there's also a connection there. It feels rather historical, but it also feels timeless, and the relationship between the main characters is so utterly beautiful but also heartbreaking at the same time. And it is a wonderful book. And I think if you are trying to approach adult fiction and you don't know where to begin, Swimming in the Dark is a fantastic piece of literature. It is very sad though, so just, you know, take note of that. So the next comparison is one that is the loosest in my opinion, but it is If You Enjoyed In Other Lands by Sarah Rees Brennan, which was one of my favorite books of last year, I believe. It is very fun, it is very unserious, and it is a fantasy story that follows our main character, Elliot, and he is from this human world just like ours, and he just wants an adventure. And he's very much a side character in his own story, but he's our main character, and we're following that, and we're seeing him experience these things. And it's very funny. It's very anti-tropey, if that makes sense. There's a lot of tropes in it, but they are spun on their head, and it's a very self-aware book, and it's just such a fun time. And if you enjoyed this book, specifically the way that we're following a character that feels like a side character, I think you should pick up If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This is a completely different book. It's not even the same genre. It is a thriller, mystery, mostly mystery, literary fiction, dark academia story that follows a murder. And not only are you trying to figure out who was murdered, because it's told, you know, from someone talking about what happened, but you're also trying to figure out, obviously, who murdered this person. And it's very different from In Other Lands, but the main character, I feel like, has some similarities. And if you enjoyed that aspect of In Other Lands, or vice versa, if you enjoyed the fact that If We Were Villains follows this character who feels like a side character but is our main character's head, and he's much more of an observer, and he, you know, is the one who is the outsider in this world that he is entering, I think you would also enjoy Elliot in Other Lands. And then, you know, if you enjoyed Elliot, I think you should give Oliver a try. So yeah, both books that I really enjoyed for very different reasons, but there is that one similar thread between them. The next recommendation I have is for the book Eragon by Christopher Paolini. Oh my goodness, this book was my childhood. I love this book series so much. It follows dragons and this connection that this young boy finds with first this dragon egg, and then, you know, when the dragon comes out of the egg, the dragon, and having that thread between them and that friendship. And then, you know, there's fantasy, there's adventure, there's all those good things too. There's war, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. I read this when I was in middle school. But if you enjoyed the connection between the main character and other dragon riders, I don't actually think this book follows dragon riders, but it's, you know, this connection, and it's this psychic link between dragon and person. I think you should pick up Faebound by Sarah El Arifi. I had such a fun time reading this book for the first time recently. I read it for a fairy vlog that I did, so you can check out my full thoughts and opinions as I read the book there. But this one also, I won't spoil what it's between, but there is this companionship psychic link thing going on, and it was one of my favorite aspects of the story. It was just so enjoyable and interesting, this idea that you can build this connection between this other type of creature. Granted, it's not a dragon, but it's still very cool, and I don't want to say too much about it because it is a bit of a twist in the story, but it is fantastic, and I would highly recommend both books. But especially if you read Eragon as a kid and have been looking for another type of fantasy with a rich, rich world, and this one's, you know, more fairies and elves, but there were elves in Eragon as well. So, you know, I think you should give this book a try. And faebound is adult, but I think it's also very accessible to people who have been reading and loving YA but want to branch out into adult fiction. It is, you know, adult characters and it is adult themes, but I think it is very approachable. So, yeah, would recommend. The final book, or two books I should say, are actually graphic novels. I was missing a graphic novel recommendation. I always do one just because I love graphic novels. But this one is If You Read and Enjoyed On a Sunbeam by Tillie Walden, one of my favorite books of all time. I've been meaning to reread this one. The only thing stopping me has been that my copy is in California, and every time I think about bringing it with me to New York, it is so big and so chunky and heavy that I always end up switching it out with something else. But I do want to reread that book sometime soon. If you enjoyed this book for the kind of science fiction, especially sapphic themes that are in it, I think you would really enjoy, like genuinely just absolutely love Don't Go Without Me by Rosemary Valera O'Connell. This book I read at the beginning of this year. I have not been able to stop talking about it or thinking about it since. It is just so beautiful and enjoyable. It is a collection of short stories, so it's less of an overarching storyline, but I think there are so many themes of romance and friendship that you would really enjoy that, you know, are similar to On a Sunbeam. And I think it was just fantastic, especially the second story, which follows this space adventure gone wrong. I think really would be enjoyable to audiences of On a Sunbeam. But that being said, I would recommend both books wholeheartedly, and Don't Go Without Me isn't necessarily adult, isn't necessarily YA. It's kind of floating around as far as genres go, which I love, but I do think it is a bit older than On a Sunbeam, but I still think it's approachable to all audiences. So don't let that deter you if you didn't think it was adult and were looking at it. You know, it's a rough adult recommendation. So those are all of my recommendations I have for you today. Let me know how you enjoyed this video format and if you'd want more recommendations in the future. It took me a very long time to read enough adult books that reminded me of YA books to actually create this video, so I don't know when that would come out, but if you have recommendations below for duo, you know, pairs of books that, you know, go hand in hand really well, feel free to comment them. If you made it to the end of this video, maybe comment a dragon emoji. Just thinking about Eragon and missing that world desperately. Anyway, thank you again for watching, and like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe, and come into our Wicker library. We have a fun time here, and I will see you in the next video.